Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of The Fishing Teacher, and really appreciate you guys swinging by the channel to watch the video and spend a little time with me today. Always very grateful for that. And guys, today we're going to be giving sort of a comprehensive Jig Fishing 101 seminar here. You know, if you've been watching the channel much or my other ones, you know I've been talking about jigs quite a bit because we just launched my new Blaukat Throwback jig last week, so I've been giving a lot of jig tips. But I thought what we do here, since the fishing teacher is sort of for the beginner or people just sort of getting started in bass fishing, I want to give sort of like a good introductory little talk on how to fish jigs from a foundational point of view. So we're going to get into that in today's video. Also guys, the jig that I'm talking about here, this is my new Blaukat Throwback jig. It's available at Tackle Warehouse. I'll put my Tackle Warehouse link in the description with my Throwback jig from Cumberland Pro Lures. And if you're not familiar with it, guys, let me sort of give you some of the ins and outs of a jig design, what makes a jig good or not. First of all, the head design. The head design we have here really comes to rock and wood good, and then see where you tie your line right there? That's called a horizontal line tie. Some jigs have a line tie that is in line with the head. A horizontal line tie is much better because it's a lot less weedless, a lot more weedless. It allows that jig to pivot when it comes over a piece of wood and it doesn't get hung up near as bad. And then we've got a good matching weed guard that matches the head. It's got a nice short shank 4/0 mustad hook, and the short shank is really good because it creates a nice small profile for the jig. And then we've got a real nice double keeper here for your plastic keepers. And then the skirt, the main thing about this jig that makes it really good, this is a live rubber skirt, and live rubber has so much better action in the water than silicone skirts do. Flares out a little bit more, and these are hand tied, with thread. So they're very labor intensive. So anyway, there's 6 different colors we have at Tackle Warehouse, so link in the description there. Okay, when you're talking about jigs, guys, one of the things that I hear a lot from the people that are just getting started with jig fishing is it's hard for them to get confidence in a jig. It's like a lot of people have confidence in throwing like a Texas rig worm, but for whatever reason, they don't catch many fish on jigs. And the reason for that is a lot of people don't know how to set up jigs right or use the right colors or know what situations to use them in. We're going to go over that in today's video. But if you can catch fish on a plastic worm, you can catch fish on a jig because they're basically fishing the same way. You work a jig and a plastic worm, very similar. They work good in the same type of areas. You know, a Texas rig worm or a Texas rig creature bait is good if you cast it or pitch it and flip it around cover. The same with a jig. So the way that you manipulate a jig is the same as a plastic worm. You know, you throw it out there. Now you're worm fishing, you may drag it a little bit like that, but on a jig, you don't really drag it as much unless you're throwing a football head jig. A traditional bass fishing pitching and flipping jig like the one I designed, it's designed to be hopped a little bit more. So if you drag a worm like that and you shake it a little bit like that, on a jig, you hop it a little bit more. You just try to hop it off the bottom. So instead of just dragging this jig right along the bottom like that, you want to make short hops with it. Let it go down, short hops with it. That's what really helps create that reaction strike on a jig, is when you do that. And also, if you've ever noticed a crawdad, when a crawdad gets scared, it scoots really fast. It'll even jump up and swim in the water and come down. So obviously a jig resembles a crawdad, so that's another good way to work it. So that's the main thing with that. Also with a jig, you can get by with a little bit heavier line, because on most of my jigs here, which they come in a 3/8, a half, and a 5/8 ounce, most of the time I use 17 to 25 pound test Seaguar and Vizex line, depending upon how heavy the cover is. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, first of all, the jig weight for basic jig fishing 101. You got 3 different sizes: 3/8, a half, and a 5/8 ounce. 3/8 ounce is the most popular size for most people fish. It's user friendly. It sinks fairly fast, yet also it's got a slower fall rate than a little bit heavier jig. So for most fishing situations, like if you're fishing a jig around a boat dock, or if you're fishing a jig around a stump, or maybe casting it to the edge of a grass bed, or pitching it up next to a bluff bank, a 3/8 ounce size is a really good size. It comes through the cover easy, comes through rocks pretty good all around size. The half ounce is a little bit in my opinion, is for 2 different things. The half ounce is for fishing a little bit deeper water, and it's a little bit, maybe if the wind's blowing harder, you can control it better. And then at 1/2 ounce size, you can also start penetrating heavier cover. So let's say, for example, you've got a lay down tree in the water and it's got a bunch of gnarly limbs on it, where if you pitch the 3/8 ounce in there, it may be a little bit too light to get down through some of those thick limbs. A 1/2 ounce will allow you to effectively get down into those a little bit thicker limbs a little bit quicker. And then the heavy model, the 5/8 ounce jig, is for situations where you're fishing a lot thicker cover, say for example, thicker grass beds or mats or reeds or bulrushes or lily pads, something where you actually have to penetrate thicker cover is going to be necessary. Or if you have a day that the wind is just really blowing hard, like a 20-mile-an-hour wind, I'll go to a 5/8 ounce. Now, one of the most important considerations in a jig from a basic point of view is your color selection. And to make it easy, to sort of simplify everything, you can sort of get by with 3 different color combinations based upon the water clarity and the sunlight conditions. There's a lot of different jig colors out there. Like I said, we make 6 colors, but there's dozens and dozens of different colors. But the 3 primary colors that you want to get on there is you want a black and blue with some type of a blue trailer on it. This is a good all-around color for sort of off-colored water. And when I'm talking off-colored water, I'm talking water visibility, say from maybe 1 to 2 foot is a really good color for a black and blue jig. Black and blue jig works in a wide range of sunlight conditions, cloudy, partly cloudy, anything like that. It's probably the most popular color of jig that most bass anglers use. For whatever reason, the way that a black and blue jig looks in the water, the bass, it's really appealing to a bass. So you definitely need some black and blues. The next one is probably one of my favorite that I use a lot, is a brown jig with a green pumpkin trailer on it. Now this is it's a more subtle color, so a brown jig is going to be a lot better in cleaner water. So I usually use a brown jig if that water visibility is anywhere with say 2.5 foot or cleaner. Ideally, sort of that 3 to 4 foot clarity would be really good for a brown jig, especially when you have some type of a watermelon or green trailer, and it looks really natural in the water. It stands out a little bit, yet it's subtle, and bass love a brown jig. You can catch bass on this combo right here about anywhere in the country. It's probably my favorite colors for as far as just getting a lot of bites and catching a lot of fish. Brown jig, and sometimes also I'll use one that's got a little bit of orange in it in the spring too. We make that one too. And finally, for the dirty water, there are situations where you have dirty water, low light conditions, and that's when I like a black and chartreuse jig with a black and chartreuse trailer on it. This would be good if you're fishing water visibility that has less than a foot of visibility, dirty water, or say the days out there where it's raining. You can't beat, guys, if it's a rainy day, you can't beat black and chartreuse, even if the water is a little bit cleaner. If you've got water visibility 3 feet or so, if you've got a dark rainy day, that chartreuse really stands out. And black and chartreuse is always my go-to on any type of a rainy day. So it's pretty simple with that. I mean, one of the things about jig fishing you're going to find out is that you really have to experiment a lot with your different type of trailers and color combinations. These are just some of my favorites that'll get you started, but sometimes you have to mix and match them. You just have to experiment. Sometimes, on a green pumpkin jig, they want a green pumpkin, or on a brown jig, they want a green pumpkin trailer. At times I've caught them on a black trailer and a blue trailer. So just experiment a little bit. If you got your basic jig selection of like 4 or 5 different color jigs, you can really do a lot to accent the color of those jigs by changing up your jig color trailers. And also a big tip, guys, here is if you're using any type of a green pumpkin or a watermelon trailer on a jig, take advantage of the dyes like that, like any type of a dye that you can buy, because I use orange and chartreuse a lot. I'll show you, it sort of adds some nice color to it, especially to water's a little bit more off-colored. See that little chartreuse, that it just sort of gives it a different look there, and sometimes that really makes a big difference. But I probably use either chartreuse or orange dye. I'm going to guess probably anywhere between 30 to 40% of the time on most all my jigs. And also, guys, I'll link all this stuff in my Tackle Warehouse description, the dyes, the trailers, and the jigs and everything if you want to get that. Main thing is you just got to fish them. If you fish jigs, you sort of have to make a mental shift a little bit where you're probably not going to get as many bites on it. Let's say if you and I go fishing and I'm fishing a plastic worm and you're fishing a jig, I may get 20 bites on a plastic worm and you may get, 7 or 8 bites on a jig in the same type of situation, but your 7 or 8 bass are going to weigh 25% more than my plastic worm fish. That's just the advantage and the disadvantage of jigs. Produces bigger fish but fewer fish. And experiment also with hopping it. Sometimes they like a short hop off the bottom, sometimes they like you to hop it a foot off the bottom. Like anything else, it's just you sort of have to do what the fish prefer, not what you want to do with it. So anyway, this is a basic foundation, guys. That should get you started if you don't know much about jig fishing, and give it a try. I think you guys will be fans of it once you get going on. It's a really fun way to catch them. We'll talk later. See you.